J&K Show. We're proud to have our next guest, Dr. Frame. So when we think about what we do and the difference that we make within the culture or changing perspectives, no one is doing more than what Dr. Frame is doing. We're delighted to have you here today. Dr. Frame, welcome to the J&K Show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here on the J&K show. Thank you for thinking of me, the work, the impact, to have me as a guest, and I'm looking forward to, a fruitful conversation.
Yeah, likewise. I think oftentimes, so I interview and talk with a number of folks, but rarely does something that I think also kind of touches me personally, right? And we'll talk more about you and the work that you do. Actually, perfect segue for our audience members that may not be familiar with you and the work that you do. Why don't you take a moment out to explain exactly who you are and and your organization?
Yeah, Dr. Brandon Frame, founder, chief visionary officer of the Black Man Can Incorporated. The Black Man Can is a nonprofit organization that I started 15 years ago as a blog, and it has grown into the nonprofit that it is now, where we have programs in schools across the country and in juvenile centers across the country, working with young men around social emotional learning, entrepreneurship, leadership, and many other areas that we know we want to develop our young men in. And then we also have our like media culture side where we have events and create and amplify content that showcases positive, uplifting, empowering images and narratives of Black men and boys.
Yeah. You do a great job of that, but did it always start out that way? In other words, was the overall vision when this first kind of crystallized for you in your mind, is this what you envisioned, or did it kind of evolve into what it is today? What was that arc like?
I definitely think it was an evolution. I would say a quote that I live by is once you make an observation, you have an obligation. So I made an observation that Black men and boys need to see positive images of themselves and have their stories told. So therefore, I had an obligation to create it. And so that started with a blog. So in 2010, I just got a domain name, started a blog. And for the first 3 years, that's all I was doing. I was a blogger. Like, and if you go back to that time, like that was a big thing. Like in the mid 2000s, late 2008, 2009, and into let's go the first Obama presidency, right? Let's just use that. Like blogging was like a really big like thing. Like there was lots of bloggers. And so I was like, man, how can we be a part of it? Or how can I be a part of it? Oh, the Black Man Can. And there's, a little bit of genesis on the name there. And then after the 3 years, I'm like, man, I've interviewed over 200 men, covered all
Wow.
these stories. And I said, how do I take these men and bring them to the boys? Because I'm like, oh, these stories, they have to meet these men and see that their dreams are possible because so many men could relate to when I would interview them, that they could relate to when I was younger. I didn't have access to this. I didn't know, right? So like we don't want to continue that. So how do we take all these men and bring them to the next generation of boys who have these aspirations and these dreams? When we started
Yeah.
doing that, people would ask like, can you bring, at the time it was called the Black Man Can Institute, can you bring that to my city? And so that's how we kind of went from like starting the programming into like, okay, we're going to become a nonprofit because people are like, oh, we can donate to you for this stuff. We would like to donate to you, and then from there, and then you get merch and everything. So it's definitely been a gradual evolution from what was started as a blog and is now a fully functional, nonprofit organization impacting the lives of Black men and boys across the world.
Yeah. So I love that story, and so starting with the genesis of it and how it's certainly kind of grown to so much more. So you mentioned that this is 15 years, right, and still growing. It's a living, breathing organism, right? It's not static. Hundreds of interviews. So I think you have a great perspective. What is the current narrative around Black men today?
Um, that's a wonderful question. I want to say I think that we have reached a point where we know that Black men are not monolithic. Now, what still gets perpetuated is negative stories, narratives, characteristics around Black men overwhelmingly, as opposed to hearing about all the amazing ways we are making a difference in our communities, how we are raising our families. I think that that narrative is still not as prevalent in terms of how it is told. We do have more amazing pieces of content, right? You can go on Netflix and Hulu and even online, and there's Black streaming services where you can see the diversity of content. But unfortunately, still, like if you look at what's going to get greenlighted first, it's probably like a gangster show, right? Like, right, but you still can find This Is Us, where you have a Randall, right? So there is the range that does exist where that range did not exist 20 or 30 years ago. So you get that, but still overwhelmingly negative stereotypes and portrayals are greenlighted first, are sometimes even ones that win awards. That's why I think Sinners and what we're seeing is like really great to see that, right? And even before with Moonlight, like so like over time we've seen growth. We've made progress, but it does not mean that we have reached the promised land that where we need to be for us and for what our young, even for the next generation, and what they need to see about who they can become.
Right. Listen, I'm old enough to remember where black folks criticized Hollywood for their depiction of black folks. We were in movies and films, we were pimps and criminals and the hired help. And so there was something that we were certainly conscious about and spoke out about it. Fast forward to more current times, I feel like there's so much content where it does depict the worst of us, the worst images of us, but I think the what really kind of stands out to me that oftentimes these are black folks who are posting these negative images of other black folks. How did we get here from where we were?
It's such a, I love this question because the book that I'm reading currently is Brainwashed
Hmm.
by the founder of Burrell Communications. And he goes into a lot of these different tropes and different things that we've experienced throughout. And that's even one reason why I created the Black Man Can is in some ways it's not even necessarily about changing the hearts and minds or mindsets of white people, but also really just changing the hearts and minds of ourselves,
Right.
right? And letting specifically our boys know, like, nope, you can accomplish. There are black men. Everything you want to do, whether you be a video game designer or you do want to be a professional athlete, there are black men who have done that, and giving them the opportunity to meet them, hear from them, see them, I think is so important. And I think when we think about what and how we got there in terms of blacks putting down each other or sharing the negative images, like there's just a historical track record there in terms of us being fed not positive images of them ourselves, and us being put even as black men that like we have to compete with each other, right? That goes all the way back to being enslaved and slave masters making black men fight against each other to the
Mm.
death, right? And like that carries through like generation to generation. And so I think all those, so many of those pieces are what create us wanting to make fun of our oppression, as opposed to being like, how are we really going to truly create liberation? And what steps are we going to take? What are we going to do to really unify collectively, right? As opposed
True.
to embracing rugged individualism. I think all these things are aspects of the work that must continue so that we can actually have in full the communities and the society that we want to have where everybody can live, thrive, flourish, and have a dignified life.
Love that. There's so much there. And so I kind of feel like if there is an image of a black man, and depending on who's looking at it, there's a subtext and, it's kind of this byline to it. Some of it true, some of it not. Just kind of in a very broad sense, what's a myth about black men that you believe you can easily debunk? That somewhat is kind of like this general understanding of what we are or how we are or what we do. and you being in this space and understanding and working with us, advocate for us and say, hey, this is not true.
I think one that just like immediately pops into my head is will say like black men are not nurturers. And that's just false. First and foremost, if you were an athlete, you had a coach and your coach through coaching was nurturing you. Now, we might have a vision, an image of what nurturing looks like,
Mm,
but your coach are is a nurturer. Your teacher is a nurturer. If you had a black male teacher, right? And so I think all these different areas, your pastor can be a nurturer, right? So
right.
there's all these different ways that show up as a nurturer in society, and black men hold those roles, thus becoming nurturers to those around them, communities around them. And I think that's really important to just debunk, because we'll say, women are nurturers and we're disciplinarians or whatever it may be, and that's actually not accurate. But that is a stereotype, a myth that I think we can just off the rip debunk in terms of how we show up.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely did not think you were going to go there. And I like that though, because it really is not something that maybe we kind of connect with that. The image of black men, right, at a glance is this strength and hard. And so to use that word nurturers, I think is awesome. And it's not something that we typically hear as a word associated with black men, but I absolutely love that. What we do oftentimes hear, oh, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that as we as we are evolving as a society, as a community, um, it's important to embrace the full range of masculinity, right? I think too often in generations prior to masculinity, the way I like to describe this is you remember growing up in the 8 box of Crayola crayons,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Right. And so, but do you also remember the 64 box of Crayola
of
crayons?
course. Yeah, yeah.
Right. So we as men have learned to understand our role in the world through an 8 box
Mm,
Crayola crayon. So our emotions, the way we're supposed to move, who we're supposed to be, when in actuality, there's you actually, because you're a human being, there's 64 ways to show emotions, to show up in the world. And so if you only operate from the eight, you're actually not embracing the full range of what it means to actually be a man. And so I think that that is the growth that we're continually undergoing, is to reach that point where we have the language, and we have the space to embrace all 64 ways that we can show up as a man, which ties into being a provider and a protector. But we are just caught into the get an 8 box crayon, and that's where the problem starts to lie. That's where it starts to show up in our relationships, shows up in the community, as opposed to being able to see like, oh, I can cry, like, right,
right.
just that, right. Growing up, most of us were probably somebody, whether it was our mom or grandma's, there's somebody that said boys don't cry,
Sure.
man up, right. And that is not allowing us to embrace our full human self. The only space it was okay to cry, I think, as a man growing up, and it's still in so many ways today, is you can cry in sports if you win or lose. Usually the championship game, though, it's cool. Like if you're crying at the champion, you won or you lost, you cried, nobody says anything. That's cool. That's what's up, right? Um, you can cry at a funeral, right? Cool. Nobody's like, nah, man, you gotta admit, nope, nope, it's cool. After that, you can't really just start, and the people, but
That's good.
actually crying is a human emotion. And because you're human, you're experiencing something that's causing you to cry. And so you should have the space to do that. And
Right,
so I think again, these are just the areas where we get to grow and evolve so that we can be the full human beings and men that our communities want, that our women desire. So
right. I'm not going to ask you if you think there's a double standard. I'm going to take a leap and acknowledge the fact that we all agree that there is a double standard by which we're judged and measured by. On the sports side, uh, we had, I guess, recently, former Michigan football coach Jerome Moore was fired from his role in part because he had a relationship with a coworker. A couple of years before that, was it 22, 23? Mel Tucker, black head football coach with Michigan State, very similar in that he had an inappropriate relationship with the coworker. So one of the narratives that came out were how folks held this up and said, "Hey, this happens with other races, other people," and they felt that these gentlemen were being kind of nailed to the wall, if you will, for doing something that many other men have done. Petrino, not to be mixed up with Patino, but Petrino, who was a coach with Arkansas, same thing, and he made his way back. We haven't seen Mel. I don't know where Mel is. Mel Tucker, maybe someplace out where he is, and Sharon is sitting in jail, obviously because of some other things. One, as I said, we acknowledge that there's this double standard, but do you believe that it's well placed to hold us to a higher standard? And yeah, I'll leave it there. Do you think it's well placed to hold us to a higher standard? And then, as a result, should we move differently in these spaces?
So first, I appreciate the question. First, I'll say this: there are two things. There's probably more than two things, but for this conference, for what I'm gonna say, there's two things in this world that I know for sure that are undefeated. You know what those two things are?
What's that?
Two things that are undefeated. One is Father Time, and LeBron is probably the only person who currently is defeating Father Time. Don't know how he's doing it, but he's defeating Father Time. And the other thing that is undefeated is pussy or vagina, right? Like just like I think first that's something we just have to acknowledge here, right? Because both all race, all ethnicities, there's men who we just go through history and you're like, yo, you were at the pinnacle, you accomplished XYZ, and your downfall, regardless if you were able to bounce back, regardless of being double judged, the downfall was women, right?
Yep.
And so I think that with that, there is, to your question, the first thing is like, there is a level of discipline here that needs to be, that a man needs to have, right? Like, yes, you have assumed some power. Yes, you have made accomplishments. And in many cases, some of these were married, but you did stand before God or the God that you worship and give
Oath.
a
Yep.
oath that you are going to honor this one woman and have a family with this one woman. So I think first thing is to just acknowledge that wow, there's a moral character disconnect that exists, right? In you, and maybe that power got you because some people do these things thinking they're never gonna get caught, right? So that's I think that's really important to just acknowledge and say when it comes to this topic and to being a black man. And then on top of that, yes, you need to move even with more precision, right? Like there's not a black man who's going to achieve certain levels, and then there's going to be people of potentially any race, but definitely there's going to be some white folks who are like, man, I'm just waiting.
Right.
I'm waiting for the misstep, no matter how it's got to be small. Because they'll just write an article about you because let's use Obama. Like, so we start with Obama being an example of this. When he wore a tan suit, they ridiculed the man, right? What do you think is going to happen to any man, especially black men, I guess, any sort of, they can call you out on your character?
Right.
That's immediately when, how? I'm just waiting, right? Matter of fact, they probably flaunt them in front of you.
Mm,
So boom, I can get you out this role, and then that when that happens, oh, I don't even got to pay you out because it's one thing if I got to fire you, but I still got to pay you
right.
your contract out. It's another thing when I'm like, oh nah, you broke the term of the agreement. That's 8 million. Yep, I'm gonna keep that, right? So I think we do need to move different in a world where people do not want to see black men, black people become excellent and achieve the highest roles. Don't think that they're deserving. Don't think that they're competent enough. And because of all that, you need to move differently. You need to think differently. And then on top of just as a man that again, I think almost every single person you mentioned was, for the most part, in many cases, these are all married men. So now we're just talking about character. We're talking
Right.
about morals. What type of man are you? Who are you showing up? Who do you want your kids to be? Some of the, you use coaches like you have young men looking up to you,
Right.
young men who decide to come play football for you, right? Because they believed in what your program and what you're doing, and you're out here doing immoral things. I think there's that's a problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. This just jumped out at me, and I did not feel. I think I was kind of on the outside uh, against, I won't say against, but on the opposite point of view from many of my black counterparts, because I went directly to these brothers and I was blaming them. When we talked about those stereotypes and those myths and other things, so when I was in corporate America, two things that always stood out to me was in terms of how I moved. One, that right, wrong, or indifferent, black men are hounds, we're skirt chasers. So what I did is I made sure that my behavior was beyond reproach. I had down the org chart, I had women on my team, and I couldn't afford to have a reputation that suggested that, hey, this guy's on the hunt. People are in your office. Sometimes those are closed door sessions, just one on one. So I thought it was incredibly important to have a reputation that supports that. So there's no, hey, he used to date this colleague, he used to date that colleague. Absolutely not. The other one is that we're prone to violence. So, that colleague or somebody would do something, and I remember a colleague saying to me, well, I told him, hey, don't let Kay find out. And I said, well, why? Well, and I knew why they were saying that. Like, what am I going to do? Like, go club the person about the head and shoulders because there was a dispute at work? And so when I saw what happened with Coach Moore, Coach Tucker, it just took me back to those times. It made me think about that. Listen, you're in that environment, move differently. We shouldn't, to your point,
Yeah.
reinforce these things. There are people that are waiting for you to trip up. Grandma told us you're going to have to work twice as hard to get half as much. Okay, and we accepted that. So yeah, there is a double standard to which I say no one cares work harder, but I feel like it's um, that maybe folks use the hypocrisy argument as justification, as opposed to really kind of pointing out to me which was the real issue and the cause to it. So I may have lost you on that one. You may say, what are you talking about? But um,
No, I'm with you. I'm with you.
yeah, good stuff. So it's interesting also too. Um, just as a thought, I went into AI, and I asked AI the question about this kind of the state of black men in America. And one of the things it said, it says black men in the U.S. face significant systematic disparities in health, education, and economics. So it goes on to say, a whole lot more, but something that stood out to me, and I want to get your opinion on this is when it said black men in the US face significant systematic. And so the word systematic really kind of jumped out at me. Um, and so I, I want your thoughts on what that is, because systematic is to me is not a single person that maybe has an agenda, who has their bias and maybe has a penchant for doing something just based solely on someone else's race, but more it aligns with industry, company, policy. And I wanted to get your feeling on that. What's your opinion on that?
You know, okay, so this is a very much a very real question, right, in terms of the systemic challenges. So first, this will start with the education side of things, right? So under-resourced schools, disproportionality and discipline. There's almost no school you can go to in the United States of America, and the number one discipline referral rate is for boys of color, specifically black boys, right? There are lower expectations not being placed in honor roll opportunities, right? And then there's an over population of black boys in special education, right? And then not even getting the right special education services. So there you have a starting point. So that's starting around first, second, third grade, and then that's gonna follow you all the way through. Then you have criminal justice, disparities that then start to pop into play. You got racial profiling, you got over policing, high arrest rates. The list goes on. Then even we've all probably watched enough law shows to see like, oh, somebody just gets a little misdemeanor, and then next thing you know, they're doing 5, 6 years for that because they had a coin appointed attorney, right? So just these things, right? Then you get into economic and employment barriers, right? These are also things that are very real because we haven't created pathways for different things, and not just thinking about pathways and trades, but even just into professional degrees. What do those trades look like? And that even circles back to your education side in terms of what does that look like to create very viable pathways for our young men to be able to succeed in order to be able to live the life that they want to do, live the dream, and even with that, so we have mentoring programs in schools all across the country, and one of the things we talk about a variety of things with our boys, and sometimes one of the things we talk about that I think is not talked enough without to our boys. One is in America, we talk a lot about passion and purpose. You just got to do what you're passionate about, what your purpose is. Not saying we shouldn't talk about those things, but what we do talk to the boys about is especially when you're talking about developing skills, is that some everything that what you're what you're good at and what you're passionate about sometimes aren't the same thing,
Mm,
and that's okay, right? So like for example, you might be a great plumber. You might be very skilled at that. You might be a very good coder, right? You might not be passionate about coding, but you're really good at it, which allows you to make money from it. And then you can go live out your passion, whatever that may be. Your passion might be to be the best father. And how do I get to be the best father? Because I'm really good at this skill that allows for me to then go be the best dad that I want to be and provide for my family, right? Then we get into health and wellness challenges, right? So we have much lower um, health expectancies, and some of that is on us too, right? Like we're in an age where there's more than enough information in terms of what you're supposed to eat, how you should carry yourself, how do you take care of yourself. But then we also have an oversaturation of certain things in our own communities, from check cashing places to fast food restaurants. People grow up in food deserts, so I think all these different things are their unequal access to healthcare. Then we can get into mental health and emotional well-being, and what we do there in terms of ensuring that we take time for rest, that we are not suffering in silence, that we are not on an island by ourselves, and us creating community, right? So all these things are like different structural barriers that we run into, and even going into just the media, right? Like we have to play a role. Like if we go back generations, there wasn't a J and K show. There was just NBC, ABC, CBS, and that goes to a little bit what we talked about earlier in terms of the growth of being able to showcase who we are and our representation. But there's still an over representation of us as just criminals or athletes, and that's all you can be, as opposed to being caregivers, being fathers. We know the CDC data talks about how much more black men are even active dads, right? And I think we see it a lot with the millennial generation. I think a little bit Gen X, but definitely millennial dads and so on, in terms of who we are showing up as fathers and what that looks like and
Sure.
I guess showcasing that narrative. So I mean I could keep going, but those are just some of the like structural things that we've faced that have impeded us from reaching our full potential as, black men.
Right. During the last presidential election for 24, it data shows that a number of black men broke for President Trump on his way to being elected. Is is that a response to what you talked about, where systematically these things are in place? Was that a response to saying, "Hey, we acknowledge that we don't like where we are and how we're depicted in these systematic um, processes are in place, and uh, this is the person best to assist with us or aid us in getting away from that environment, or does or does it mean something totally different? Why he broke, why so many black men broke for the president?
We're getting into some areas that I feel when you bring black men together, it get touchy for them because I think first and foremost, if we're talking about the last election, one reason why we had that. Well, oh, let me back it up first. 92% of black women voted for um,
Come,
Kamala Harris, and
yep,
I think we were at what 80%, 82%, I think for black men. I think it was 80%
okay,
for black men voted for Kamala Harris. So first, 80 8 out of every 10 black men voted for Kamala Harris. 9 out of every 10 black women voted for Kamala Harris. So first, I think that's just very important to note. And pe- thinking about what you just mentioned as well, in the 2020 election, that 92% and that 80% was higher. So on both accounts, um, there was a loss, right? It was not the same as it was in the 2020 election. So I think that's very important to highlight. Secondly, we cannot deny that patriarchy and misogyny played a role in some of the views of that. So do I think that it was like, oh, this is the person best suited to give me a better life or no, like I think that there are a contingent of men who will forever be extremely patriarchal for various reasons, forever be very misogynistic for whatever reason. There are men black men who are like, a woman is not supposed to be the president of the United States of America. A woman cannot lead. They lead with their emotions. And the list goes on of things that they'll say, which is incorrect. However, that all played a role and there's many factors here.
sure.
But I actually don't believe that is fully that this is the man who, because I think overwhelmingly people don't think the government's going to give any black people anything that they actually want and desire, whether it's Democrat or Republican. But when I think about the numbers that we saw and some of the narrative that I heard, I think that had more to do with steeped in patriarchy and misogyny than the idea that uh, I don't even say his name was going to be better for the advancement of black men and boys if he was elected president.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, it is interesting because, and thanks for sharing that. Thanks for sharing those numbers are getting closer to it. I think optically, what we saw was, well, optically and auditorily speaking, you hear this narrative that black men are supporting at the time candidate Trump, and then you have the optics of President Obama, and he certainly gave a speech and stumped for Kamala, specifically talking to black men. I guess it also lended itself to the narrative that there was this exodus of black men. Thus, why he was out there saying, "Hey, you all come on back home," kind of thing. So I
Yeah,
think that's
I
kind of
think
where it is.
yeah, I think there I can't really recall an election even when President Obama, so President Obama's first election was my first election that I could vote in, right? Like I was of age to vote I was 18 years old. So, over 18 years old. So that's the first one. Prior the Bush one of 2004, I wasn't old enough to vote, right?
Right.
Um, so for me, I don't I can't personally recall any sort of um campaigning where like what are we doing to campaign for black men? Like
Mm,
if we just be, and maybe you can, I think you got me by a few years, but you can't fully recall. And if you can, please let me know. But for me, from 2008 in every election since, I've never really seen candidates from a state, local, or national level say like, okay, I want to galvanize black men. I want to pull them together around a set. What are the set of issues that this particular group really cares about, and then how can I make sure that when I'm campaigning, how I'm going to address that, just so that they feel like, okay, you came up with a list of 8 things. What I can campaign on are these three, and then and we have collectively decided like, okay, we're going to support this candidate. I also think that's something that we could do, right? We could say, hey, what does it look like to have a national lobbying group on the behalf of black men? While we are monolithic, there's a set of 8 ideas or principles that like, hey, these are the 8 things that really impact us as black men regardless of socioeconomic status. This is what we live to see you campaign on. So I think that we've never really fully seen that ever take place. You had with Kamala Harris put together, at the first time I had ever even seen something like, oh, this is what we're gonna do for black men. While Obama was elected, he did launch My Brother's Keeper. That was more so focused on youth, more than anything. But still, nonetheless, I think there's a lot of space and opportunity for us, one, to galvanize ourselves, and also what does it mean to hold our elected officials accountable? Because I've met black men, the same black men who have said some of the things that you're mentioning. I'll ask them, who's your congressperson? Who's your state rep? And people can't answer that question. So I think that, but if I ask them, just like if I were to ask you, like, what do you care? What do you care about? Guess what? There's a line item. There's a budget for that. There's a perspective that your elected person has on that one thing. What is it? How are they advocating for it? And I think while yes, we're all trying to provide and protect for our families and grow, I would say that and being a man and in providing and protecting, one aspect of that is, are you politically engaged?
mm,
Could we say right now that that's even one aspect of what it means to be a man? I would say that's probably not something that you put as like, oh, well, if you're a man, what are the things you are aware of? I don't know if everybody would say, but if you're not politically engaged, politics is working you regardless, right? And so some of the things you want, some of the things you need are tied to voting. They're tied to who's representing you in office. And so I think there's a push that we could have around what does it mean to be politically engaged so that you can get the things that you need, because the government should be providing it for you.
yeah. You know, that Dr. Brown, you touched on something that I do as well when I'm engaged in these conversations with folks. And I'll ask them, who's your local? Folks generally don't know. They don't even know what district they live in. And this is New York City. They're not sure what district they live in, who the DA is, for the area. So it's interesting that you talked about that. And they're all saying that all politics are local. And I would dare say that that alderman for you has greater impact to your life than, say, someone on Pennsylvania Avenue. It's not that that person's not important, but who's the president of your parent teachers association probably far more affects you and your family more so than someone who's miles and miles away. So thanks for that. My last question is for audience members and others, if they want to get involved, you do such great work. I think it's great. And just a little bit about me where it kind of correlates is where I think something that you do. So as a young man, I can't say enough about representation. So growing up, I didn't see certain types of black men. And when I did, it was eye-opening for me. And it really, really kind of changed my life. And so I feel like Black Man Can helps to offer that. One, it's kind of shaping and redefining, if you will. And I say that sheepishly because I think it when I say redefining, it would almost suggest that the definition doesn't exist. But we are, but it does, and we are. We're a proud group of people. But I think it also helps and allows us the positivity around us, the good representation, and so forth and so on. So, what can someone do to be more involved, to help your cause, to help the cause of the community and these young men that you support?
We're always looking for people who want to maybe volunteer their time to come in and speak and share their stories with young men. Also, to do the work that we do, it does cost money, so we're always interested in those who would like to donate financially as well. How you can give your time, you can give your talent, you can give money. All those things are very important, as well as just continuing to spread the word. What we're doing at the Black Man Can, you can if you don't want to just donate, you can buy a sweatshirt. 100% of the proceeds from our e-commerce go back to the organization. Everything we've really worked to create multiple streams of revenue that allow for us to do the work, which is what many nonprofits should be doing. But we have this huge opportunity to have a robust e-commerce. But when you buy a sweatshirt from us, when you buy the affirmation cards, you are in theory supporting a young man, right? Because we use that money, you cover the cost of what it means to run that part of the business, and then the rest of that goes right back to young men being able to go on field trips, for young men to be able to get different books and hear from different speakers. I kind of believe that can't while volunteers we can't solve issue through volunteerism, right?
Mm,
Like we need actual dollars that we can then hire black men who are going to be the facilitators, who are going to be mentoring the young men. It can't be like, oh, just kind of give your time. That's a part of it, but we need brothers being paid to be mentors and working with young men, and we also need
sure.
people to volunteer their time. That's the ecosystem that we've kind of created with the Black Man Can, so that we can create tremendous impact and do the work that you're speaking of, and it pays dividends. I mean, you can go on our website and see our impact report and see all the different programs that we've run and the impact reports from there, and it's because people have given time, talent, and treasure, so that we can move the needle forward for our young men, from young men who might be in Jack and Jill all the way to young men who have made a not so great decision in life and it caused them to be incarcerated. I think that's been the beauty of this work, is that in 1 week I can spend time with a brother who is down bad because of all the way up to the attempted murder charge, all the way to sitting with a boy who's got two parents at home and lives a really
Mhm.
abundant life, but is also still looking for some guidance and some knowledge, right? That we need every single black boy, every single black man to reach their full potential, regardless of socioeconomic status. And that's literally what we've been doing and pushing forward. And appreciate anybody who just sharing stories on Instagram, telling somebody about the Black Man Can. Another thing we've really been big on, like if you go to the website and you see the work that we're doing, you're like, just ask yourself, man, who needs to know about this organization
Mhm.
that
Right.
could that's a funder, right? Whether it's a philanthropic funder, it's a person who has a high net worth, right? It's like, oh, they need to know about this work, right? This is not isolated work, right? It's national, it's global, and so all those things are greatly appreciated because it allows us to push the mission and vision forward so that the world knows us and others of other ethnicities and races that the black man can.
Yeah. I think I agree. More people need to know about what it is that you're doing and seeing how they can certainly help that mission. And we'll certainly do our part and encourage our listeners, viewers to do the same. Dr. Frame, I can't thank you enough for joining us, carving out a few minutes for us. Truly enjoyed the conversation. You are always welcome back. You have easy pass and you have unfettered access to this program here. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching the J&K Show.